Here's a real line from the movie. You're anal as hell. I, on the other hand, am oral as hell. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding this film. Polarized critics at the Cannes Festival, some calling it one of the worst movies ever made. Others more on the highbrow spectrum berated the haters, telling them they just don't get it. It's too smart for your own good. You see, there are only two split opinions to have about this movie. There is no middle ground. If you hated the movie, you are anal as hell. If you loved this movie, you are oral as hell. This is what cinema is about. I've been waiting all year for something like this. A once-in-a-generation film with dialogue as cutting edge as Madame Web. You might think I'm joking. I do not. You heard what I quoted from the film. How can you possibly take this film seriously? This is a movie that has been in the works for many, many decades. It still puzzles me why studios wouldn't want to finance this project, especially when you consider the director involved. He is one of the most influential filmmakers in American cinema. Francis Ford Coppola reportedly postponed Megalopolis to repay his debt to Hollywood for successive box office bombs. But I don't get that. When you've made The Godfather 1 and 2, Apocalypse Now and The Conversation, Hollywood should be in debt to you. And Coppola was so fed up with studios he decided to self-finance the film, to be free of producer notes and constraints. No one was able to hold him back. And I respect that. He sold a portion of his winery, just a small, tiny little portion, that gave him $120 million to get the picture on track. This is probably the biggest middle finger to Hollywood you could give. A chance to prove to studios what they're missing when you pursue ambition, creative freedom, and deeply important messages. I just wish this was made by someone who wasn't so full of himself and has no idea what he was doing. Well done, studios, you win this time. Just continue making more Transformers and Mufasa origin stories, because Megalopolis completely justifies you to make those safe corporate stories. So where do I begin in setting the general premise for this giant mess of a movie? How about this? I'll quote someone famous. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Therefore, guard accordingly, and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature. Marcus Aurelius. Now you're probably thinking, why did I quote someone from ancient Rome? Because I can. Does it have any purpose towards this review? No, it doesn't, and that's exactly what Megalopolis does. They'll quote someone like a famous Roman or something out of Shakespeare, and it won't have any meaning towards the film. The characters will say something that sounds smart because it's wordy and bloated and they use big words, but how do you expect an audience to relate to that? And it's got nothing to do with it being too smart for me and I just don't get the message. It's not that. Whenever there is a conversation between two people, it doesn't sound real. One character says something, and the other character says something completely irrelevant to the previous character's line. It's as if they're in a different room talking to another person in another conversation, and the editors just mashed these two conversations together. And the truth is, it's not a dialogue. They're just performing pretentious monologues that don't correlate to what either character is saying. So Coppola set out to make this movie, attempting to depict the similarities of the fall of Rome and the current state of America. The city is called New Rome. This whole movie is inspired by a conspiracy that took place in Rome 63 BC. I knew nothing about this part of history, and this movie has done nothing to sway my interest. In fact, I refuse to learn anything about that conspiracy because it will just remind me of the chaos I just witnessed. And that is perhaps the only saving grace I can give this movie. The chaos that ensues is incredibly memorable because the performances from the likes of Adam Driver and Shia LaBeouf are so over the top and exaggerated. I heard that there was a lot of improvisation on set because Coppola was just making things up as he went along. Which makes sense, it's not like you've been working 40 years on this project, and now all of a sudden the script is in the hands of the actor's creative freedom. This is why half the crew on Megalopolis quit, and the VFX artists, and I don't blame them. We can talk about how bad the dialogue is and how absurdly shocking some of the performances are, but the visual effects are something of an acid trip. In fairness, sometimes it looks good, but most of the time you can really tell it's not real. The actors are so clearly defined in a green screen studio, it doesn't match up well at all. There are a lot of creative shots and effects that work when they're not showing the vast scope of the city. When it's more minimalist, the effects do look more convincing. Other times the cinematography is going in a wild direction that matched the chaotic nature of the movie. When it did go crazy, that's when I was on board. But not in the way you think. I just found it really funny. It was both cool and ridiculous. You cannot take the tone of the movie seriously. Either you're going to be like me and just embrace the stupidity, in which case you'll have a thoroughly entertaining time. But if that's not the case, then you'll find the movie quite overbearing and incredibly full of itself. Which it is, but the performances and script are so lively you can't believe that these people thought they were making something that would change film forever. I don't blame the actors here, this is entirely unpopular. The direction was quite terrible when it came to directing the actors. The biggest criticism is how weak the script is. The improvisation didn't help, but gave me a better understanding that there was no structure to the story. People just said things and it never really stuck with you. There was no impact in what the characters were saying. There was foreshadowing, but that was obvious. In any movie there's going to be conflict, someone dies, someone gets betrayed. The dialogue wasn't giving us anything to engage and relate to the characters. I didn't like Caesar as a main character. He was just a pretentious douchebag like every other character in this new Rome. None of these characters felt human. Caesar's goal was to create a utopia that threatened this Roman-inspired government. It was almost like his character should have been someone of a poor background. A rags to riches character would have been more interesting and made him more likable and at the very least relatable. He also has the ability to stop time. Having this ability is quite extraordinary, and in any other movie makes you a cool character. But in this movie it doesn't. He stops time by simply saying, "Time, stop." I'm not kidding, that line told me that this movie really thought it was a game changer, when in fact it is the exact opposite. Caesar and the rest of the characters didn't feel like human beings, so everything felt alien to me. The messages were pretentious as hell. They just started showing a clip of Hitler and the history of various governments and dictatorships in a preachy montage. It came off as very obnoxious, treating the audience with zero respect with these condescending moral lessons. Yeah, 1 out of 10. I was going to give it a 2 or 3 out of 10, but the ending was so stupid, it deserved a 1.